Okay, World Cruisers, here we are in St. John, New Brunswick. It's the fourth stop in our trip. The first one was Halifax, then up to Sydney, and then Prince Edward Island. Now we sailed back around to St. John. We're in the Bay of Fundy, where the tides are the highest tide swings in the world. You can see there, they go up to almost 50 feet, sometimes over 50 feet in the worst time of the year. So our first stop was on the way out of town was this pulp and paper plant, which is right on the St. John River. And it gave us a chance to see what the tidal flow was coming down. This is the St. John River you're looking at. So to the right is upstream of the river, and to the left is the Bay of Fundy. And what you're seeing there are the rapids that are created when the tide is going out. And the tour guide told us that there is about a half an hour slack tide between when the tide goes out and when the tide comes back in. And sometimes during slack tide, when there's no water flowing, there'll be seals and whatnot hanging out in here, but the water's brackish. She said that it pushes the water, I think she said 80 miles upstream. There's so much tidal flow. She also told us that the combined tidal flow that's going in and out of the Bay of Fundy is more than all the rivers in the world combined, which seems like a big number, but I could believe it after seeing what happens here. So this is out of sequence now. This is later in the afternoon, but it's the same exact spot when the tide is coming in. So here the salt water on the left is pushing the fresh water on the right up to St. John River. And at the time we were here, the rapids weren't quite as large as they were when the tide was going out, but it still gives you a pretty good idea of the huge volume of the tidal change. And so in the town of St. John, the tidal change is about 30 feet, and we were headed in a bus to the next town up the Bay of Fundy called St. Martin's Cove, where the tidal swing is about 36 feet. You'll get a chance to see the port there with the lobster fishing vessel sitting on the floor of the ocean when the tide is out. But it's pretty fantastic to see that tidal change. And so here we are. We've driven to St. Martin's, which is about St. Martin's Cove. It's about an hour out of St. John. And the first thing they do is take us to lunch at this little restaurant there. They're known for their homemade biscuits, which were actually very good, and their seafood chowder, which is excellent. We had seafood chowder on 2 tours during this trip, and it was amazing at both places. So it's got clams, it's got haddock, it's got lobster, it's got scallops, I think, in it, and it's just really fantastic seafood chowder. So highly recommended. It's the only restaurant in St. Martin's Cove that's big enough to handle a busload of people. And they serve the fresh homemade biscuits and then a bowl of seafood chowder and a can of soda pop was our lunch. And this we did before wandering out to watch on the beach the tide. If you stand there, you can watch the tide come in. And I've got some time-lapse videos to show you how quickly the water's moving. And then we'll go to the harbor and see the boats sitting on the ground. So here, time lapse. This is just a couple of minutes. You could see me walking over to the end of the point and then coming back. By the time I got back, my base of my camera was covered in water and it fell over, and I set it back up and then let it run a little bit more so you can see it's coming in little waves very fast as you watch it. And this cave, which is down on the beach right near the restaurant, walking distance, gets filled up with water all the way, like 4 times a day. I think the tide changes every 6 hours. So there's nothing amazing here. There's a couple of birds. You can see those white dots at the end of the cave. They come in and roost when the tide is out. But this whole cave is filled with water at high tide. And we happen to be here, obviously, at low tide. So you can see the restaurant we ate at, those windows up there about the middle of the picture, up above the beach. And then a short distance away is the harbor in St. Martin's Cove. You can see the covered bridge. They have lots of covered bridges there. It makes them last longer. She said with a covered bridge, the wood will last about 70 years, or maybe only about 10 years with an uncovered bridge. So that's why they cover them. But here, these boats are sitting right on the water. It's kind of weird to see this. I have my relatives. My grandfather was born on the island of Grand Manan, which is just off the coast of Maine, and kind of the entrance to the Bay of Fundy. And I think there is about a 35-foot change in the height. So there, just like here, the boats sit on the ocean floor during the low tide, and water comes in and floats them. And so if you're a lobster captain, you got to pay attention to what time the tides are in and out. In order to be successful, you get stuck out in the bay somewhere and not be able to come into the harbor. But fishing is their main economic driver for this little town of St. Martin's Cove. I've got some pictures. This is the boat that was a little bit farther out. You could see where easily there's a 36-foot swing. Those are lobster traps there. Here, most of the lobster traps are made out of metal as compared to back in Prince Edward Island. Most of them were made out of wood. These are all metal traps. You can see that each boat has its traps. They're only allowed a certain number of them, and they have them stacked next to the boat. So here, the water does not freeze in the winter, so I think they can leave the boats in the water. I'm not sure if they pull them out here or not, but there's a bunch of surface floats right there. So they string like 6 traps together. One surface float will go to the first trap, and then that trap is a 100-foot rope to the second one, 100-foot to the third one, and so on. So they can, by pulling one surface float, they can get to like 6 traps. So imagine these are surplus floats when they decided to string the traps together instead of putting one float on each trap. But I see in these traps, you can see a surface float in most of them. So I'm not sure how that works. And here, the colors aren't quite so, the fall colors aren't quite so pronounced as they were up farther north in Sydney and Prince Edward Island, and also Halifax. Anyway, that's the tide's out. You can see way out there's the breakwater where it would go 36 feet. And then coming back into town, they took us to the St. John Central Market, which is kind of a interesting place. I'm sure they take all the tourist buses here, but you can buy a lot of different souvenirs, but also fresh produce and local produce, fish, meat, lots of vegetables and stuff. There's fresh bakeries, there's, coffee shops, that kind of stuff. So it was an interesting place to walk around and look. Before we hopped on the bus and went back to the boat, we had I think a 2:30 all aboard time today because we got to make tracks and get back to Boston in time. So here's us leaving. Now, as we were leaving, they had a medical emergency. So you can see we back out, and then we go right back in. Here we're backing out. So stay tuned. My next video will be lobster fishing off the coast of California near Morro Bay. And so we'll try our luck.